So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on this very last webinar of the series Fashion, How Do We Do Better? For those of you who come for the first time, I'm Raphael, and I'm an MBA student at Bocconi, and I connected with my school club, Ethica and Luxury and Art Club, to 6 other amazing students, Catalina, Emilia, Guru, Jolie, Sylvia, and Rachel. And we created together this week of webinar around sustainable fashion. So we've been talking about production, we've been talking about brand assortment, communication, but today we'll go more into sustainable business model. And for this new topic, I'm delighted to welcome Nicole Bryner, Head of Southern Europe at Vestiaire Collective. So Vestiaire is a leader of online platform for selling and buying pre-owned luxury items. The company connects seller and buyer and ensure the authenticity of the goods. And Valeria Valotto, Vice President of Progetto Quid. Quid is a social enterprise that employ more vulnerable people to produce beautiful clothes using leftover fabric from luxury brands. And finally, Habi Andan, leading the Italian practice and worldwide innovation practice at Bearing Point. Bearing Point is an international consulting company committed to transform business model thanks to innovation and technology, and to also include impactful, sustainable strategy. And of course, Francesca Romana Rinaldi is going to be our moderator again today. Francesca is the author of the book Fashion Industry 2030 and is also a teacher at our school for the classes CSR and Luxury. Just before starting the discussion, I would like to one last time quickly remind you some Zoom feature. So we kindly ask you to stay muted and without any video. You have 2 views for Zoom. So you have the speaker view with only 1 video showing, or you have the gallery view. And for that view, you can click right and hide non-video participants. So you will have only the video of the speakers showing. And finally, please share your question to the chat directly to me. We'll try our best to answer them during our Q&A in the end of this event. So thank you again, enjoy, and Francesca, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raphael. Thank you one last time. I really need to congratulate you and the Ethica Club and the Luxury and Art Club at SDA Bocconi for all the efforts for making such a successful event. I think we had a lot of fun. We enjoyed it very much. I personally did. I think the guest speakers did as well, and also the participants. So let's do another time as we did during the week and for this final meeting. And as you mentioned, it would be dedicated to new business models. I wrote a little bit about this topic in the book that you mentioned, which is this one, Fashion Industry 2030. And basically what I wanted to share with you at this very beginning in order to set the floor is the fact that there are actually some drivers of change that are reshaping the industry towards the future. Transparency and traceability, and we have been talking quite a lot about it in the previous events, especially yesterday, and circularity, and we're going to focus much more about this topic today, including collaborative consumption. What does it mean, circularity? Where does it start? So it's not just about recycling, really. It's starting from repairing, and we have been talking about repairing yesterday also with Patagonia. Reusing, we will talk about it also today, especially when we'll be focusing on secondhand. And also recycling, of course, and we'll be talking quite a lot about this topic with Progetto Quid. So at the end, it's about reimagining the whole value chain and every activity of the value chain. This may include also a very important topic that probably will be touching today, which is a higher level of collaboration with the consumers that need to be active, not anymore passive. So they are not just at the end of the value chain, just buying the product and that's it. In the future, we'll see a much higher interaction with the consumers that will be put at the center, and they will be engaged in order to do something. So asking to the brands what to do with so how the product was made, but also asking for higher and better options. So maybe not just buying, but maybe renting or maybe buying secondhand. So we'll see a lot of different options that will be asked by the consumers, and consumers will expect that. So we'll be talking about recycling with Progetto Quid. We'll be talking about collaborative consumption, that is including rental, but also re-commerce, and we'll be talking about re-commerce with Vestiaire Collective. So I'm really looking forward to start with the first questions, including also questions that I will be asking to Rabbi. So bearing point, being a partner of the Italy practice of this important firm-wide innovation consulting company, I will start from him. Europe and Italy specifically, compared to US market, are a little bit more conservative, I would say, and more attached to tradition in terms of how they consume fashion products. So maybe they just buy, okay, instead of renting or buying secondhand. So Italy and Europe, it's a little bit less advanced. What are, on your point of view, the key points to change the consumer habit, the perceptions of new ways of consuming fashion? So not just buying, but maybe renting or buying secondhand.
Clear. Thank you, Francesca, and actually thanks again for inviting me and for inviting us for this session. So to go back to your question, I think you're absolutely right. You can see actually in Europe and in Italy, I mean Italy in this case in particular, definitely different kind of habits in terms of buying, consuming fashion. That is definitely the case. I would tend to, let's say, to challenge that a little bit, because I think one of the things that we need to consider is that the different generations that we have actually in these various countries and the kind of behaviors that they have that are very different. So what we see actually is definitely, the newer generations, so Generation Z, millennials, where a lot of their influence actually is coming very much from what they are actually involved in on social media, which is by essence quite international and quite influenced also by the US. They tend to have, let's say, behaviors that are closer to what we can see in the US. That said, for all the other generations, indeed, they are much more traditional in their, let's say, or conservative, if we can say, in terms of their buying habits. So we really, when we think about how do we influence those changing habits, we need to cater for the different kind of clients or consumers that you have in Europe, because really now the spectrum of behaviors has changed quite a bit. Nonetheless, regardless of where we are in that spectrum, I think one thing remains definitely valid is how do we accelerate, let's say, that the capacity to adopt new buying behaviors and accelerate that, to get these new business models in place. For that, I think we need to go back to some of what we're seeing actually in various studies now, and which is becoming the trend, which is the fact that for a lot of the customers, they have become very much value driven, and they are willing and looking to consume based on something that is closer to their own core values. And we've seen actually in a lot of our studies, basically, that just about 70% of the consumers are actually willing to change to brands or to situations or to models that are closer to their own core values. What we see actually is even out of those, about 50% that are willing to change their buying habits. So not just changing brands, if these brands actually are getting it right. And they will willing to be changing their buying habits, even pay a premium actually in terms of what they consume. So with that in mind, the one way to try to influence that change in buying habits is for us to start actually connecting the new buying habits, the new business models, to the core values of our consumers, which require understanding basically that generational gap, the ones that are more interested in sustainable buying or in certain core values, and basically explaining for them, educating how the new business models, the new ways of buying actually can cater for their own core values. They match more their core values. I think that is ultimately the game that needs to be, let's say, that needs to be won. And that will require quite a bit of education, explaining the benefits on that, educating the consumer on what do they gain actually with that change of consumer, buying habits, and how it's actually closer to their own experience, involving them in that experience. So I think, ultimately it's going to be in that kind of direction. How do we link the new business models to the core values of our customers, which will require, again, understanding the core values of our customers or the consumers here, whether it's in Italy and Europe, and connecting the benefits of the new changing habits to those core values through education.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the new generations still need to be educated, and all generations probably, towards sustainability, but especially the new generations since they are much more unloyal compared to other generations, they actually need love marks. So we really, and brands actually need to explain probably much more with a better storytelling. Yesterday we talked about this topic, we talked about communication. So thank you for making the point again.
Maybe Francesca, on that one, I think the holy grail now of the consumer is that the rise of the purpose-driven consumers. And I think for that, for the brands, basically, they need to connect to that purpose of their consumers. And then from there on, basically be able to offer new alternatives.
Purpose. Okay, we'll come back to this. Thank you. Let me ask now to Nicole, Vestiaire Collective, about secondhand. So we have been seeing actually in the last years, and especially the last months, a booming of the secondhand. Secondhand started with multi-brand platforms such as Vestiaire Collective. But now we see that more and more we have some examples of brands that are handling it themselves. So first of all, what does it mean for you, for multi-brand players? We have some examples here, the Real with a collaboration with Stella McCartney, Burberry. Maybe there will be more partnerships coming up. So I wonder if also for Vestiaire Collective that will be a partnership. Are you planning for partnerships? And what do you expect to be the best also for the customers? So in terms of creating value for the customers.
Okay, Francesca, first of all, for inviting me. I'm very happy we managed through the technology and Zoom to have anyway this speech. So no, this is a very good question. So regarding, we are a multi-brand platform, and we are very happy that now also the brands and mono brands have start to have this channel. For sure, we notice that the consumers are very thrilled to find the treasure hunts in a more multi-brand platforms. We have to imagine that we have 3,500 brands on our platform, as we are a business model that does not own the stock, but is our sellers who put it in the platform. So we have a lot of options, and it's our community who is posting it. So is what really the consumer love and took care in the past years is not what the fashion industry proposed. So this is, we saw that the consumers are love really to spy the wardrobe of our community. Regarding the brands, for sure, we would love to partner and to have win this battle together for sustainability. So we partner last year with BCG, which is a consultant company, and we built a report together with a survey, and it's called How Secondhand Have to Partner with how secondhand should partner with the brands. So they can have multiple advantages, as you mentioned. Stella McCartney partnered with The Real. We did some partnerships as well in the past, and I hope will be more in the future. So there are so many benefits. First of all, like is a recruiting mechanics. So we saw that in this survey we did that a lot of people that could not afford the first-hand luxury tried their first purchase on a certain brand, on a luxury brand, through second-hand. And in the years they started, then the 62% of these people started to buy first-hand. So this is very interesting. So you can approach for sure the young generation, as we said, first through the second-hand. Second is that the sellers that we have are also buyers. So this is a circular model. So you give the possibility to the people to sell and to give a space to the wardrobe for the new, and also have an income to buy the new. So it's a way to collaborate for sure. And third, that is one of the most important things for me, is to have more sustainability. So to, like I said before, to win this battle against sustainability, be more sustainable, we have to think that last year we sold 100 billions of clothes. So this is a huge number, and we have really to do something to help our planet. And we have also to think that 80% of the fast fashion, for example, we just throw it away, and this is not possible. We have really to battle together with the brands and with all our power to change this world. And another last numbers I want to share with you is that we noticed that in the last 12 months, only between the 53% and the 79% of clothes that we have in the wardrobe we wear. So we have really a lot of unworn clothes in the wardrobe, and why not give the possibility to sell and not to have this pollution in the world.
Yeah, and you mentioned an important data that I always mention in class, using also the Ellen MacArthur Foundation studies. So basically what's happening is that we are buying more and more, also because the population in the world is increasing, and we use less and less. So every time I ask the students in class or the participants, how many of you use 100% of the products in the wardrobe? No one is raising the hand. How many of you even know and are aware on the products that you have in the wardrobe? No one is raising the hand for the 100%. So we need to do something. This is not anymore sustainable. And good to know that is also, let's say, working on secondhand and launching secondhand programs could be also a way to create a loyalty somehow, no? So to, let's say, accompany a little bit the customer with you. So we expect for more partnerships in the future. We'll wait and see. Thank you so much, and I'll come back to you, Nicole. Now I would like to ask something to Valeria, and let's welcome again Valeria Vallotto from Creed. So we talk about circularity once again. So circularity in general, reusing material, re-commerce, closing the loop is mentioned a lot as a good solution to go towards a more responsible business models. But the issue is that very few established brands are really working on it. So I would like to ask to share with us, on your point of view, which are the main challenges, and then we'll see also how Project Creed is solving this challenge.
Yeah, thank you, Francesca, for this question. Spot on for us. And thank you, Rafael, for having Quid here and for sharing the link to our website as well. Maybe not many of you might know us. We are a small but growing and thriving social enterprise. And as Rafael mentioned, what we do is transforming end-of-line fabric. So fabric that doesn't even become first-hand clothes, let alone second-hand clothing, into limited edition collections. We are in a great place to do this because we are based in Verona, not far from many of the historical fashion districts in Italy. That means that a lot of fabric is gathered and is collected in not far from us, and we are able to recover this fabric. Very often it's fabric that it's sent into production, but then the models are discontinued, or the weight is not the right one, or the color, the shade, it's not as the designer thought would look like, and so the fabric remains there. Sometimes it's put into long, exceedingly long supply chains, and then it's sent to Africa or to Eastern Europe to become who knows what. Sometimes it's destroyed. That depends. So what we do is transforming the fabric into limited edition collection. In the beginning, this was key to make our business model sustainable. As Rafael mentioned, we employ people who are vulnerable on the job market. So those who are excluded from the job market in Italy, and Italy has one of the least inclusive job markets in Europe. That means that a lot of our effort goes into training people who have little background in fashion or little background in administration, and then they start working in our offices and contributing to what we do. That's very expensive. It's time consuming. So we needed to make the business model a little bit lighter. And we came to the idea to ask our neighbors, so high street brand Calzedonia, do you happen to have any leftover fabric? Yes, they did. And back in 2013, we transformed nightgowns fabric into clothes. And that's where things started. Today, we work with a network of almost 50 suppliers. Sometimes they donate fabric. Sometimes we can purchase fabric for a very reduced price. When we talk, well, yes, first of all, circularity is difficult because it's difficult to implement because it's difficult to make it scalable. So we were able to make it scalable because we are amidst one of the countries, we're based in a country and amidst the northern Italian fashion district. And we have a lot of raw materials we can use. That it's not the case everywhere. In other areas, in other ecosystems will be other resources. But then another ingredient that is key to make circularity work is collaboration and partnerships across the supply chain. As social entrepreneurs, we believe that limits are starting points. And that's not just inspirational. Yes, you can think that your limits are your starting points. That's what we do and what we believe into in terms of leadership, yes. But it's also in terms of supply chain. It's where your supply chain ends, that's where my supply chain begins. And that's how we should think about circularity. And that can happen only if stakeholders and actors in a given system start having conversations about what they can offer and about what they need. And then it's on that intersection that you can create value and shared value. And then another challenge, it's not a challenge, but it's a question, an open question for you, Francesca, and for the audience. When we talk about circularity, we can talk about environmental circularity, but also social circularity. So how much shared social value do brands create? And then can we be purposeful? And can we create purpose also in this respect and on this level? And another interesting example of circularity, and I will land on that note, was we have our own chain of stores. It's 10 stores at the moment. They're obviously all shut down at the moment, and we hope to reopen them in a few weeks, actually next week. But in the beginning, we were able to test our retail model by using and repurposing vacant spaces from the Calcedonia group. So they had vacant stores, and they were offering us those stores for free to test a little bit the retail options, so the retail model, what prices customers like, what products they liked. And that's another way to think about circularity, also in terms of spaces and urban spaces. And I guess we'll need that in the months and years to come, because there are obviously sweeping changes coming with this pandemic, and sweeping changes also means challenges and opportunities. So also to redefine circularity, I guess.
Thank you, Valeria. And yeah, once again, we got back to the topic of partnership that we actually touched since the beginning and since the first event, right, Raphael? So this is a fil rouge that that is guiding us also towards circularity. So there is no way to go towards sustainability, including circularity, without partnership. Thank you, and let's touch once again the topic of what's going to happen after COVID-19, and I would like to ask something to Nicole. So once again, let's talk about distribution briefly. So what happened in the last years, I would say in the last decade, really, is the fact that brick and mortar distribution models we're already changing towards, we can call it brick and clicks. So basically the fact that physical stores, and also including department stores, but not only, basically went online, and including multi-brand stores as well. And I know that the Vestiaire Collective has been working on a partnership as well. And also the phygital trend. So online pure players going retail, maybe with pop-ups and temporary stores. So how you see the future? How you think COVID-19 is going to change this? And also how is going to rethink probably the role of traditional retail. So yeah, how's going to be the future?
Oh, no, this is a good question. So we saw before the COVID that still retail, even if online it's booming, still retail is the 80% of the business. So it's very important. And we partner with retail. We have a permanent shop in Selfridges, for example, so us, we want to spread our sustainable message. So if we do it online, but also with physical store, we are more than happy for sure. And so we saw also before this pandemic that retailers started to approach us and to put us in their timeline because yeah, the world is changing, especially as we said before, millennials and Gen Z, they are very keen on sustainability. So also these retailers with big dinosaurs that are there since years and years have to adapt to the new audience and propose also different offer and innovation. So we have been always in the roadmap. We have had Selfridges in London. We had a pop-up in Le Bon Marché as well, and in Ireland at Brown Thomas, and we are discussing with several stores around Europe and US and also Asia. And for sure, after the pandemic, I see all these giants going more online. So they implement their project online, and we are definitely in their roadmap. So for sure, I see more online and have this innovation and different offers. So more quick, more different, and more through the younger generation.
Okay, thank you. So just a curiosity, basically in every city you have an exclusive, but you're open to do everything you would like to do basically in other cities and in other countries. So you're open to collaborations also in Italy, for example.
Sure. So we started 2 years ago with just a pop-up in Selfridges for 2 weeks, and we saw an immediate success. So both in terms of selling and buying. So because we gave the possibility to the clients both to sell to give us their clothes, and we would sell for them, but also to buy. And we saw such a huge success that we discussed with Selfridges a permanent store. So we are in London, and we did the same, but only with pop-up around the world. We had for sure also some project in these months, but due to this pandemic, we stopped, and we will do it maybe something online, but definitely something that, as I said before, is still a good part of the business. So why not also spread the message to be more sustainable and through this new business model also with offline.
Okay, thank you so much. So I would like to ask another question to Valeria. It's a harsh one, it's quite tough, but I'm going to share it with you anyhow. So it's still about the consequences of COVID-19. So talking a little bit more about the nowadays situation. Actually, COVID-19 raised a lot of questions, and I agree with all the experts, and like myself, I also believe that thanks to COVID-19, the awareness around sustainability, the level of interest has increased. But still, we have a lot of questions regarding the social sustainability because of the issue of canceling orders, and then workers and factories being dependent of big brands, safety for the employees. A lot of issues actually have been raised, especially in the last weeks. So could you share with us so can you explain more how you implemented sustainability in your business model, and also what are your recommendations for other brands also that would like to do better? So how can Progetto Quid inspire maybe also other brands? Of course, as you said, Progetto Quid is a smaller brand, it's a smaller social cooperative compared to mainstream brands, but still you could inspire other brands.
Yes, and we love inspiring other brands. It's part of our mission. Our mission is to redesign made in Italy fashion while also changing the labor market. And labor market and fashion industry don't always go hand by hand whenever it comes to ethical strategies. Sometimes it's somehow a completely different ratio. So the more the fashion grows, the least the ethical standards are. But yes, so we are currently 142 employees. So yes, it's a medium enterprise, the size is that of a medium enterprise, and we thrive on diversity. It's talent diversity, but also backgrounds. It's we have in Quid, we have all the different steps of the fashion value chain. So it goes, with exception of cutting, we have everything from design to manufacturing to sales and retail. So very diverse in that respect too. And there are 16 nationalities represented, and 3 generations. So the youngest colleague is 19 and the oldest is 76, very old. She's a volunteer though. We're not employed on a payroll.
Valeria, talk about diversity. Can you make an example of what kind of diversity you have among employees?
Yes. It's mostly, when we talk about vulnerable people, that means that as a social cooperative, we abide by the Italian law percentage of at least 30% of our staff has a disability. It's 35% at the moment, and then there is another 35% of colleagues who have experienced discrimination on the job market. Sometimes it's been because of their gender, sometimes because of their sexuality, Sometimes it's been because of their background, because they are migrants, because they are asylum seekers. So there are a number of hidden vulnerabilities that in the eye of the law don't count as disadvantage, but we include everybody, and we try to build an inclusive leadership programs, not just for the employees who start, but also for the coordinators, because even people coming from the not-for-profit sector and from large corporations need to rewire their managing style whenever they come to us. And we are strict on that. We thrive on collaboration, so we exist as an independent brand, but also as a B2B supplier of accessories mostly for large brands, lifestyle, as well as fashion, Calzedonia, Unilever, Vivienne Westwood. There are several collaborations, and we are keen on bringing our experience with talks and small events at partner brands. So we try to inspire large brands as well. But in terms of social sustainability, again, what I think that in the current scenario, what the current scenario taught us is that we are connected. We are connected for worse, in that whenever someone, so the social contact in that respect can convey bacteria and can of course convey pandemics, but at the same time, that same connection and that same that same level of connection, that is, in fact, it really boils down to globalization to a certain extent, makes us also connected for better. So we should use this knowledge and this and this lesson learned to rewire and reconstruct supply chains based on shared values and shared mission. One example is we reconverted part of our production to protective face masks, but we wouldn't have been able to do so without our B2B partners, because they recommended a fabric that was antimicrobial and anti-drop. So we outsourced the fabric, and we were able to do that mostly because of the networks and the partnerships that were already existing. And that helped us retain 142 people in employment, who otherwise would have been in layoff. So again, partnership and collaborations are key to ensure that the social fabric is resistant to these shocks.
Yeah, and this is available, so the masks are available for both B2B and also for B2C. So if you go on the website.
Yes, on the website, yes. They come in packs of 6. They are reusable, so you can wash them up to 15 times. We're testing them for 50 washes. And that, of course, that reduces the environmental impact of protective masks, which is going to be huge on the sea. And we don't want to see that. After seeing dolphins swimming in Venice, we want to see not face masks, but dolphins, for the next 50 years.
Reuse the masks. Let's not throw them away right away. Yeah, because it's a big issue. Actually, it has been discussed.
It's going to be a big issue. Yes, it's going to. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Valeria, thank you so much. And we'll leave space for questions at the end. So just one last question before opening the floor to Ravi. So once again, a bearing point. Let's talk about the future. So on your point of view, which could be the ideal shopping journey if we talk about a sustainable shopping journey? So a customer journey for the consumers that will take into consideration how to do better, so how to impact less on the environment. And on your point of view, which business model will be the prevailing one? Is there an existing one? It would be a new one? What is your point of view on this?
Yeah, great. So again, actually, what happens in the future, that I don't know, but what we can see is how the trends are going. So I think with regards to your question on the ideal shopping journey, I think the ideal sustainable shopping journey should be one that definitely allows the customer to make conscious decisions, which currently actually is not available for shoppers. Now, that ideal sustainable shopping journey, I think, needs to have about, we need to include in it about 4 steps, 4 important steps. The first one actually is to provide the customer with the transparency. The shopper needs to have the transparency when they are buying. And when we talk about transparency, it's transparency across the entire chain of making that product or making that product available, of what has come into it, whether it's the material, whether it's, the emissions that are involved, but also the kind of social ethics and how you're treating, your labor across the countries. And we even need to extend it beyond just what goes into the fabrication of that product itself, to how the company behind that product is actually behaving. Are you using basically renewable energies? Are these renewable energies truly renewable? So, we need to provide, of course, trace, but provide that transparency for the customer so that they can make their informed decision with regards to their sustainable shopping experience. Now, that we need to provide to the customer, also to the shopper, at all the moments of shopping. So whether it's retail, whether it's in a store, whether it's online, or whether it's in the micro moments. I mean, what we're seeing increasingly now is a lot of us are shopping in micro moments, meaning that we're shopping when we're watching TV. We're shopping when we're on Instagram, we see something that we like, we actually click and we shop. So that transparency needs to be provided at all those micro moments, and needs to be provided in a way that is understandable to the customer. Providing that transparency is one thing. Understanding if it is good or not is another. And I think that will require quite a bit of partnership also, for instance, in terms of potentially creating certain labels that can easily certify certain things, so that the consumer, actually, an average consumer, can actually spot directly what can be good for the planet and what's closer to their core values. So that's the point number 1, I think, that we need to include in that ideal sustainable shopping journey. The second one is definitely engaging the shopper. The sustainable shopping journey of the future, I would imagine it, is one where the shopper has an active role, not just in deciding based on the information that is available to him, but in terms of their choices. The shopper is as much of a polluter, can be as much of a polluter, let's say, as the company that is producing something in a non-sustainable way. So we need to provide the customer in that journey with options. For instance, if you want it to be delivered, if you want the product to be delivered to your home in 2 days or 1 day or in the same day, that actually will require such an effort. That will require or will deliver so many emissions. Otherwise, you have other options that are more sustainable, or you can go pick it up. So, there's multiple ways where we can engage the consumer, the shopper, so that they are actively playing a role. So that's the second thing. The third point, I think, in that journey needs to provide education and information to the customer, not just about the product, but on how to, remain sustainable. So when we talk about sustainability, we're often focusing on the act of buying and end of life, so beginning and end. But there's a lot that happens in between. How you wash your product has actually a huge effect in terms of the detergents, the water that you're using. There's a lot of things basically that come into play in terms of a sustainable experience. So we need to extend that shopping experience for it to become educational to the shopper, so that they do understand actually how they can keep contributing after that act of buying. Fourth one, or last but not least, I think, towards indeed the end of life, we need to provide options for the shopper. So what do you do? And let's not just leave it to the customer or to the shopper to decide. So in a way, we need to move more and more from the transactional shopping experience to a more long-term, shopping experience, a partnership with our consumers, so that they understand basically what options they have afterwards. And based on the options that they can have afterwards, or that brand offers to them, they can also make, a conscious decision whether to buy that product or not. So the concept of sustainable shopping journey actually needs to be much more, let's say, comprehensive, educational, transparency, and letting the shopper play an active role in that.
Thank you, Rabbi. I completely agree with you. And this is, of course, also including the option of second hand, but not only. We received a lot of questions already. I'm going to ask one that is directly linked to what you were saying now. So some of the participants were asking, is it possible to adopt blockchain technology in apparel industry for transparency? So they are also comparing, to what is happening now in the diamond industry. They already did it. Some players actually, as pilot projects, they already implemented blockchain in apparel and garment and footwear. So could that be the way to go forward? So of course, it's not the goal, but technology could be a tool, an enabler for transparency and also traceability. What do you think?
So on this one, for instance, I think technology is definitely an enabler, a very important enabler that can allow us to have, whether that's transparency, education, all of that. Absolutely. Blockchain is one of many technologies that can support that. And there have been actually increasingly positive experience and experiments that demonstrate that. Now, having said that, I think it's too simplistic to rely on the technology as the savior. So when we talk about blockchain, for instance, yes, it can provide us that information or that authentication and transparency that supports sustainability. However, at the same time, it consumes a lot of energy. It consumes so much energy that actually what you can save on one side by gaining transparency, you end up basically, you're consuming energy like crazy in order to produce those blockchains. Now, that doesn't mean that we cannot use them, but that means you need to choose, for instance, in blockchain, the right technologies in blockchain that actually do not consume that kind of energy. And I think in all the technologies that are now available and that can play an very important role, there needs to be quite a bit of diligence in trying to understand not just what works, but what works without any collateral damage. Because a lot of the things actually that we are ending up doing is supporting something from one side and creating collateral damage from another. In the same light of what you're saying, for instance, renting is a perfect example in circular economy, right? If we do it right, because the more you actually rent and the more you transport the garments, you're actually creating more emissions. The more you wash them, the more you're creating emissions. Exactly. So that's what we need to, always be catering for.
Thank you for your suggestions. And yeah, I agree with you. And we also need to see how the value chain is organized. Not all value chains require blockchain, and so it has to be worth it, of course. Okay, so thank you. And I have another question for all of you, which is related to being local versus global. So do fashion business models have to get more local to become truly sustainable? Can we imagine a sustainable way to keep globalized supply chains? I don't know if anyone of you would like to, well, Progetto Quid is local, so you already have it in your DNA. So you can make a comment on the made in Italy, maybe approach the full made in Italy. But yeah, do you believe that companies that keep the supply chain quite stretched can be fully sustainable? And my next question is about fast fashion, so get ready.
If you want, I can go for the first question you mentioned. So for sure, we already work on it, and we usually push on the website. So all our websites do have also a local option. So you can see our web page in Italy might be different from France and Germany and from Spain, US. So we of course try to push the local, and also we recently we launched the direct shipping project, which means because before Vestiaire was and is still a guarantee of quality and authenticity, so the seller needs to ship to Paris, where we do the control, the quality control check, and then we ship to the buyer. Nowadays we give the option not to have these two shipments, to to ship directly seller buyer. There are eligible seller which are our trusted. We have a lot of data in the past years, so we definitely try to have less shipments first of all, and second, local to local.
I think Francesca, on that question, actually complementing what, or in line with what Nicole is saying, I don't think that I mean, a global supply chain by essence is not something that is particularly helpful for the environment and sustainable by essence, by nature. That said, a local one is also not feasible. I mean, it would be ideal, but it's particularly complicated from a business sense and from a realistic perspective. So I think,
let's say, to have all local, made in Italy, made in Milan. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So fully sustainable, I think that, so that therefore the idea of fully sustainable is an illusion. However, what we can do basically is reduce the elements. Actually, there are more certain things that need to be done locally. So reduce the impact of that global supply chain by localizing more certain items and working on it in that way. And in essence, what we need to work for is that, better is good. It doesn't have to be ideal. It doesn't have to be fully sustainable right away, but we just need to start taking some steps in order to make it better, which means that we need to review the allocation of what we need to do outside, where we are actually selling the product, and what we can do locally. And we need to review that allocation of resources on a continuous basis, and the allocation of the resources within the supply chain on a continuous basis.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, sustainability, it's a journey, and it's a step-by-step approach. And so we need to start at a certain point. And and what we said yesterday is also at a certain point, we also need to communicate as a walk the talk approach. All right, so last question, or maybe the one before last, it's about fast fashion, the fast fashion business model. So do you think there is a way for fast fashion companies to become environmentally sustainable without giving up their fast fashion business model, which leads to the launch of many collections per year? And if so, how? Or do you believe that the fast fashion business model will no longer survive as it is in a world that wants to convert to environmental sustainability? And this is a question that we and Rafael, we received basically every time, because probably there is also now a higher concern on the fact that, also before COVID, but also after COVID, we have a lot of stock, and we have a lot of unsold stock. We'll have a lot of unsold stock at the end of season. There are regulations. Yesterday we talked about also the influence of new laws and regulations that are suggesting and are also asking actually to the companies not to destroy the unsold stocks at the end of season. So this has an impact. This is going to have an impact on the fast fashion business model, on your point of view? There is no right or wrong, of course. It's a very hard question, and we cannot predict the future, of course. But maybe, so do you think that fast fashion companies will have to rethink their business model for the future?
Let me give it a go first, Francesca, on this one. So I think with regards to fast fashion, I mean, if we look at the, a larger portion of the shoppers of fast fashion actually often tend to be, let's say, composed of the new generations. They're much more, let's say, geared towards the sustainable and environmental topics now. So fast fashion definitely has the same pressure in order to do and take certain actions and certain measures. Now, again, I don't think that fast fashion per se, personally speaking, is going to be threatened, but it means that it's going to have the brands that will, let's say, continue striving in fast fashion are the ones that will take effective measures. And maybe it's not going to be around having less collections a year, but maybe about creating, platforms where also people can exchange the garments and putting them back into circulation, or creating different options for their shoppers, providing more transparency, improving the way they source the material, having more sustainable products in them. So I think there's a lot of, measures that fast fashion can take that can help them become more sustainable and more in tune with the core values of their shoppers. And I think they will be able to make that move once there is a clear realization that sustainable is not, sustainable used to be at some point good for the planet. Now sustainable can be good for business. And once that mindset is properly understood, then there's quite a bit of measures that can be taken even by fast fashion.
Thank you. Let's see if there is any other comment on this. What do you think?
No, I think as well that it's we have also to change our mentality. So because we are generating all these fast fashion needs, which means that every week we have to go and shop new items, and I think we need to change our mentality. So also the fast fashion business might change in the future, which means buy with more quality, more for longer period, and not for have a piece for 1 month and then throw it away and then another piece. So I think if we work all together to change the mentality, also the fast fashion business might change, and we have all to do the first steps. Because
Nicole, not all the products, of course, can go second hand, right? So you need to have the right quality. So basically, in order to think about the durability of the product, you need to probably think ahead, and otherwise there will be no second hand. So the life will be much shorter. So it's not just a matter of level of fashionability, but it's also a level of quality of the fiber. This is also, this is actually a suggestion that we give to all the participants that will become maybe future managers. Maybe some of them will be working in the creative departments, on the merchandising departments. So we go to the first seminar that we did, Rafael. So we'll need to consider
one last comment on fast fashion, as well as on local supply chains. I guess that's there needs to be also willingness to pay for local supply chains on the side of customers, because it's incredibly expensive to produce in Italy. And if we didn't have the circular model where we can use end-of-line fabric, then of course our fashion wouldn't be affordable. So it's a cultural change. There are cultural elements, of course, in that, and there are strategic elements. And then from the point of view of fast fashion, certainly circular design is an interesting area to experiment on. So designing clothes that can be repurposed in many ways, and then you can release several collections, but then winter can become spring and spring winter, and we are asked to experiment on that by some now of our clients, B2B clients and customers, and it's a huge challenge, because then again it goes into the question, circularity is complex because you need scalability. You want scalability. Fast fashion wants scalability. You will never be sure about the stock you have available to repurpose. But then if you start reconceptualizing design, that's a good starting point, maybe to slow down fashion, but not to stop it, because it's in the nature of fashion to be it's a beautiful intercultural exchange, and it's been that way for many centuries, and we don't want to stamp out that now, but we need to make it lighter for people, for their wallets, and for the planet, for sure.
So we need to think twice. So we need to think when we buy a product, we like it in terms of aesthetics, but is it consistent with our requirements in terms of sustainability? So I think in the future we'll see more and more consumers that ask themselves the right questions, and my hope is that there will be also more and more managers, including young managers that we train also in our masters, and in Bocconi, and even managers with high seniority. I believe that now understood which is the importance of the education on these topics on sustainability. So my hope is that there will be more and more people, including managers, asking themselves the right questions, and now we have a lot of tools in order to go more in depth. So thank you so much to our participants, and thank you so much once again to Rafael and her team, Ethica Club, Luxury and Arts Club, SDA Bocconi, for making this possible, for organizing, I will say in an excellent manner, all these events. I'm quite sad because it's the last, but we'll continue somehow.
Yeah, thank you. Indeed, unfortunately, our event is over. So sorry if we couldn't answer to all your questions. We received many questions, but in the chat, I put it back the link to our webpage where you have more background information and on sustainability and on our event. And you will also very soon have some quotes and some recording of all our 4 events that we did. And you also have our contact if you need to contact us for anything. Thank you for all our speakers. It was very great to have you today with us. Very interesting discussion. A big thank you, Francesca, for being with us since the beginning of the series, and to my team to have helped me and supported me since months now to organize all this webinar. I hope you enjoyed this week, and I hope we can all grow from this discussion and change a bit our environment toward more sustainability. I mean, I think now we all get it. Sustainability is a long journey, but it can be achieved, and we can all make it happen if we work piece by piece and all together. So thank you again, and I wish you a very nice weekend.
Congrats.
Thank you.